Perhaps the single defining feature of the current moment surrounding Iran is uncertainty. We simply do not know what comes next. There was a stage just only a few months ago when many genuinely believed that Islamic Republic might collapse. Yet despite absorbing a massive military and political shock, and despite the loss of key infrastructure and senior figures, the system there in Tehran retained continuity, resilience and considerable coercive capacity of its own. And like it or not, the South Caucasus has quietly become part of this wider geopolitical equation. Perhaps it always was, but never quite as visibly as it is today. You're watching Context. I'm Orkhan Amashov, and joining me now in the studio are Daniel Gerlach, German Middle East expert, director of the Berlin-based Candid Foundation and editor-in-chief of the Middle East magazine Zenith, and Emin Milli, founder of the Restart Initiative. Well, gentlemen, welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. This conversation is taking place at a very interesting juncture, and my first question will be addressed to Emin. Emin, last time I interviewed you last year, summer, June, I believe, if memory serves me correctly.
I think exactly a year ago.
Exactly a year ago, practically a year ago. That was during the 12th Day War, if memory serves me correctly, maybe afterwards. What brings you to Azerbaijan on this occasion? Last time we talked about restart, about recalibrating Europe-Azerbaijan relations. What is the key subject on this occasion?
Daniel Gerlach is the director of Candid Foundation, is a long-time partner of Restart Initiative, and we have been working together on Azerbaijan-Armenia dialogue before it became cool and very trendy. And I think we're very happy to see that. Candid Foundation always supported the Restart Initiative work in Armenia-Azerbaijan dialogue. And this time we are here because there were events at Air Center and at ADA University, where also Daniel had a great presentation sharing his vision basically about the history of peace building and about the interesting role that Azerbaijan is gaining in mediation, in international politics, geopolitics. We are here to also to observe how our friends come and see how things go here and share their visions and their observations, which is...
Thank you. I'm very grateful to you for this introductory explanation. Daniel, a lot is happening in our region. Just on the 5th of March, a few months ago, Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan airport was attacked by Iranian drone. Sort of this region felt as part of the wider confrontation. So what's your evaluation regarding what's happening in Iran? Because I remember the particular element from your speech delivered at that Chatham House-bound meeting. That part was open to the public, where you said that you've been always sort of trying to understand this wider Middle East, being an expert on that particular subject, and Azerbaijan was sort of a missing link in that kaleidoscope.
Naturally, look, for us Europeans, Middle East experts, usually most of us are Arabists, so we look at the Arab world, we look at the Middle East from a Levantine, Mediterranean perspective, maybe. But of course, since the Southern Caucasus and the Turkic world usually are a different discipline, that also shapes the way that we look politically at the region, right? So the Middle East is usually also, if you look at the foreign ministries, connected to North Africa. But then there is some sort of an invisible boundary when we move to the Turkic or like Turkic orbit, or let's say parts of the former Soviet region. Even like some of the countries in the region in Germany are still referred to as former Soviet countries. That tells you a lot about how we look at the region. Now for me, of course, I deal a lot with Iranian affairs and what's happening in the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Peninsula. But of course I realize that Azerbaijan's experience with this conflict is a very different one from the Gulf states. Though the country is as vulnerable, it is as involved with US, British, Israeli affairs as others. And yet there is a different way of dealing with this crisis and a different perspective also from the Iranians. So I'm not going to elaborate on why the story is different, but I realize what some refer to as the Middle Corridor, the Southern Caucasus, is becoming more and more relevant also for the, like it or not, as you said in your introduction, for the region. But also Azerbaijan is at the receiving end of a lot of what happens in the region that is not actually your own doings, but that is part of the consequences, geopolitical consequences. And so me as a historian, of course, I realized that there is more and more of the broad lines of history re-emerging. And if we look at the history of the Middle East, Europe, and the Southern Caucasus, we realize that a lot of conflict and a lot of, let's say, apples of discord or sources of contention were actually also in the Southern Caucasus when Western and Eastern empires struggled for power in the region. And if you look at the historical continuities, you realize that, of course, the Southern Caucasus and the Middle East are much more connected and become a much more joint sphere. I know that for a long time Azerbaijan said, like, let's stay out of this because the Middle East is already a mess and it's very complicated and it's very difficult. But to be honest, I feel like it no longer can stay unconcerned about it.
Also, Azerbaijan over the past few years, in particular over the past few months, was involved in mediation between the administration in Damascus and Israel. And it looks like there is an opening for Azerbaijan. Also, Azerbaijan actively involved in Syria in terms of the supply of energy resource and so forth. I mean, Azerbaijan identity is very multidimensional. Back in the 90s, we used to say post-Soviet Azerbaijan, so connection with the Soviet Union was one element. We're part of the Turkic world, member of the Organization of Turkic States is one aspect. When Azerbaijan was member of the, well, still technically Azerbaijan, member of the Council of Europe, not member of European Parliament, but member of many European institutions. So there's a sort of European identity as well, whatever by European we understand. What do you make of this recent focus on the Middle Eastern aspect of Azerbaijan's place on the global stage?
Well, I think that Azerbaijan understands itself as a country that is part of, Eurasia, that's part of Europe, that's part of Central Asia, and that is, of course, part also of the Middle East. And it makes Azerbaijan very unique. There are very few countries who have such a multidimensional and such a different and rich identity. The events that were Daniel and me, Daniel, I think, said something that I want him maybe also here, Daniel, to elaborate on this. You said that Azerbaijan's role in geopolitics has risen, and that Europe needs now to look differently at Azerbaijan, not just as a mere alternative, but there you need complementary arrangements, right? Because of the Middle Corridor, because of the war in the north, the war in the south. So the situation is changing, and I also, maybe you can confirm or not, that the attitude to Azerbaijan is changing or is not changing, but it should, no?
Well, I'm not saying Europe should do this or that, but I myself look at it differently today because, what the European experience over the last couple of months was when a system works, we tend to rely on it. And as far as the Persian Gulf, which is some sort of the new center of the world because all the geopolitical fault lines are connected there, there was a certain over-reliance of Europe on that region in terms of logistics, in terms of trade, in terms of airlines, you name it. So whereas the Gulf region for a long time was mainly ignored by the Europeans as a relevant group of geopolitical players, in the last couple of years we had an over-reliance. Now I think with the situation in the Middle East with Iran, but also of course with the continuous crisis that Europe has with Russia due to the Russian assault in Ukraine, we have a space between these two, of which Azerbaijan is part, and probably of which Azerbaijan is at the core, that has more potential than we have explored. So when I talk about complementary partnerships, of course I think that the world behind Azerbaijan in the east, from a European perspective, Central Asia, is now opening up in a different way. There is now a different attitude, and it's no longer just considered the backyard of Russia as it was for a long time. Now the Europeans are going to certainly at one point settle their issues with Russia and improve their relations with Russia. I'm not talking about the next couple of years, I'm talking about probably a long-term arrangements. And what is important, like if we forge new partnerships and complementary partnerships with this part, with the Southern Caucasus and Central Asia, it can't be an either or. It can't be a temporary arrangement. After the beginning of the Russian assault on Ukraine, I experienced these conversations in the Arab world and the Gulf, where many people said, like, now you're coming to us, you're looking for partnerships. We know that once you have settled your issues with Russia, you will turn away from us again and focus on them. That cannot be anymore. And I think that is something that many in Europe have learned. Our neighborhood is not endless. We have a limited number of partners that we can work with on certain issues, on others not. And we need to strengthen these partnerships, because there is the southern and the southeastern neighborhood at the moment. On the other side, we have Russia, and then we have the Atlantic Ocean. And even the transatlantic partnership is being challenged at the moment.
Yes,
so I think this is why the region becomes strategically more important. This is why I think not a completely new approach, but different priorities. But also I think it is important for this part of the world, for Azerbaijan in particular, to look at Europe in a different way, and to just to forget about certain issues of contention in the past, and rediscover that Europe is an extremely attractive partner, an extremely attractive market, an extremely attractive zone of geopolitical orientation. And I think this is an idea that I can promote.
With Germany at its heart.
Also, yes. We are as good as our neighborhood in the end.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating observation. We are as good as our neighborhood. Talking about neighborhood, and at a time when it looks like, although we're not entirely sure, but it looks like the center of the gravity of world politics, somewhat moving from the Atlantic to Pacific, with Europe's own role being challenged massively, in particular over the past couple of years after the re-elevation of President Trump to presidency. A number of important developments have taken place here as well. But in the South Caucasus, Azerbaijan and Armenia on the verge of signing the peace deal. This means stability. Importance of this region in the context of Central Asia is also increasing, because basically, if you want to have alternative routes, if you want to make sure you're not reliant on Russia, and we know that relying on Russia is not a brilliant idea in the case of Europe and its energy capabilities and security. And if you don't want to rely on Russia or Iran, and you want to connect Europe with Central Asia and China, you have to go through South Caucasus. Definitely you have to go through Azerbaijan. We see Azerbaijan being more proactive with regards to different elements in the Middle East. And you once famously observed that the post-Ottoman world order will be over once. I think you mentioned 4 states: State of Israel, Syria, Palestine, and Lebanon peacefully coexist. I know this question is constructed in a very sort of a complicated way, but how do you see Azerbaijan fitting into that sort of conjecture?
Look, of course, Azerbaijan is far away from the Levant. But at the same time, you have certain issues to contribute, not only in terms of resources and diplomacy, which you have already done, but also in terms of a certain positive legacy. Azerbaijan is a country with a majority Shia Muslim population. At the same time, you have a secular system of state, which is a positive legacy. And it's something that is not that often in the Middle East, or let alone in the Muslim world. Privileged ties with Israel. We will have a new Israeli government at one point, and hopefully also a different Israeli policy in the region, and trying to not just like to coerce your neighbors into partnerships, but partnerships that are based on mutual respect. Europe is not able to handle all these issues and to drive them in the right direction. We need partners, but we need partners that also have a certain understanding of multilateral security arrangements. Now, when I talk about the post-Ottoman world, I really mean it. I think we and Europe have struggled with the Ottoman and post-Ottoman legacy, and do not understand until today that the Ottoman Empire and the post-Ottoman world is as much part of Europe and of our neighborhood than Eastern Europe, let's say. So I think the idea of nation building on the foundations of a let's say secular way of thinking is something that is inevitable. It will come to the region, but it takes time, and it takes partnerships. So I think diplomacy can do a lot, but diplomacy needs to be based on mutual respect and on the recognition of certain principles. Azerbaijan is a relatively small country with resources, but it's a small country. So international law is very important for small nations. And we in Europe see that there was a demise, like a disrespect for the international law in the last couple of years. So we have an interest, and we know we're being challenged because of double standards with regard to international law, different priorities, but still we need partners who think that international law is relevant. The Gulf states are going to tell you the exactly same thing. They are interested in the resurrection of international law, not in the demise of international law, where everyone can do whatever he or she pleases. Now, what I think can be a role for Azerbaijan in all of this, in let's say a process of stabilization of the region, is to connect the European, the Turkic, and the Middle Eastern world to each other. That's one thing. But there's also another experience. Azerbaijan has a practice in multilateral conflict resolution mechanisms because it was once part of the Soviet Union. And we had in 1975 the Helsinki Accords in Europe, in which for the first time the Western and the Eastern Bloc somehow decided, okay, let's have a conference of cooperation and security where we try to address crises before they emerge, where we openly meet frequently and uphold communication based on certain principles, which is which is the respect of borders, which is the respect for peaceful conflict resolution, and that's a multilateral framework. And I think if such a multilateral framework re-emerges from the current crisis in the Middle East, of which Iran and Israel could be part of, then there is certainly a role for Azerbaijan to put this, to be a midwife together with other powers in this process, out of self-interest. Peace building and diplomacy are most of the time conducted not because of altruistic goals, but because you have self-interest to live peacefully with your neighbors.
Would you call it OSCE for the Middle East?
I think the jury is still out there. You know,
I'm familiar with this term, by the way. It was floating in the air within the analytical circles of Azerbaijan.
Yeah, of course, it is a certain reference point, as there are others. But I think we should really look back into the history of the Middle East, the history of of the region of Europe, and find, and this was one of the goals of my work as an author. I recently penned a book about 3,500 years of peace-building efforts in the region, where I really try to look at historical precedent for peace-building operations that worked. Even though the nations involved in it later on waged war again, but they came back. One example is not far from here. It's the Peace of Amasya between the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire in 1555. Until today, Turkish and Iranian diplomats refer to that peace agreement, which defined not today's borders of two countries, but gave a reference, a default option to which you can.
I could be entirely wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the current border between Turkey and Iran, within that section, remains the same, in line with the Gasrishin Treaty. Am I right to say that?
Yes, more or less. And you see, like there is examples for nation states that have remained more or less intact in the region, like Iran.
Turkey and Iran are very similar in that particular respect, as long as Middle East is concerned, because there is a continuity of statehood. As long as Iran is concerned, and there is an Ottoman continuity with the Republic of Turkey, the entity, the transmission of legal personality happened in the case of both entities. One more question about Iran, if I may. We don't know what will happen. During my introduction, my first sentence was that if there is one defining feature of the current situation, is that it's uncertain. We don't know what will happen. We talked about conflict resolution. Once, Emin, I think a couple of years ago, very famously observed, and I remember, and I quote you, Emin, you said that liberal democracy is a fantastic thing, of course, but the problem of many European countries regarding Russia was that they don't know how to deal with Russia. Quite often, when you deal with occupation, particularly Russian occupation in Ukraine, you need to know how to deal, and you need to sort of apply Russian methodology vis-à-vis Russia. I think you said something along those lines. My question to you, Daniel, do you believe Europe at large, West, knows how to deal with Iran?
Well, look, we had a multilateral arrangement in 2015, the so-called JCPOA, the nuclear deal, which was which emerged, which happened under European sponsorship, with large investment of Germany, France, the United Kingdom, the EU, the United Nations, and if we talk today about negotiations between Iran and the United States, let's not forget that this is the first time, if it happens, that some sort of a bilateral agreement happens, whereas the previous one was a European-sponsored, very complex, very sophisticated multilateral arrangement. I think it was a good thing, though it didn't address these issues that people talk about, the missile system, Iran's complicated role in the region, and so on. You know, this is something that was not addressed in this deal. It was about the nuclear, a supposed military nuclear program of Iran. Now, I think the Europeans bilaterally are able to realistically assess the situation and the future of the conflict, which we could see very clearly in the last couple of months. I mean, there was a reluctance on the side of many Europeans with regard to this Israeli-American operation on Iran, because we saw that the outcome will not be as was desired by America and Israel, because we think war is mostly a speculative approach, but probably the most speculative approach in policy. And this is not the way that you change and that you achieve what you want to achieve in the region. And it's a violation of international law, regardless of what you think of the Iranian regime. Now, I think there is a certain degree of obsession with Iran also in the West. And Iran in many ways replaced the role of the Soviet Union in the collective, let's say, mind of Western intellectuals and policymakers. But a realistic assessment of Iran, you know, you need to discern between Iran's foreign policy behavior and foreign policy goals and its domestic setup. And that is, I think, something that you know, there's in the West there's always a big polemic about it. You know, you try to analyze, you try to understand what the Iranian regime is doing, and you're being accused by default of trying to justify the Iranian regime's action by providing a realistic
After what we noticed regarding Iran, this is one particular question which has always been there and always been put to different experts, and different answers have been provided. Iran is they've got a very interesting system there. If you interview their foreign minister or deputy foreign minister, they reply in a very civilized language, using diplomatic jargons and so forth. When you hear from their intelligence officers, from IRGC people, they speak a completely different language. And quite often they send these mixed signals. We witnessed it here in Azerbaijan on the 5th of March. On that very day, I was interviewing, literally that very moment, Iran's deputy foreign minister. He talked about peaceful arrangement, about Iran would never attack neighboring countries. And simultaneously on the same day, IRGC commanders were saying that Azerbaijan will be punished for having allegedly, and we know that it's not the case on the basis of what Azerbaijani officials are saying. There's been no proof in that regard, basically. They were accusing Azerbaijan of having Israeli bases here. So what I'm asking, is this deliberate attempt to have one civilized face for the world at large and one a different kind of face for domestic consumption?
Well, that happens, I'm not equating anything, but probably trying to compare, that happens in many countries in the world. You have, if you go to Israel or to the United States, you will have very different tones from people who are actually part of the, you know, members of parliament or representatives of the government. Now, in the case of Iran, I think it is in a way the legacy of this revolutionary system, of a system that still believes that it is in a constant process of revolution, where you have at the same time a very synchronized behavior of the institutions that can even sustain dramatic weakening and dramatic attacks as the Israeli and the Americans, but at the same time has some sort of a variety of mixed messages and opinions. And yes, I think it is part of the strategy, and it's in the same time a very peculiar kind of middle power that believes it can, you know, fight at the same weight as superpowers. And Iran is a country that doesn't know the concept of allies. It's been like this for, you know, Iranians love to talk about historical continuity for hundreds of years, but and I think it's worrisome for people in the region, and legitimately, you know, you are worried about these mixed messages, and they're extremely insensitive. But at the same time, I think you as neighbors probably know better how to deal with this historical experience than many of those who live far away, and it's very difficult. Also, why that Western countries, in particular the United States, are trying to convince the neighbors of Iran to adopt their /American vision and approach on Iran. And that is one of the major contradictions in the region. And I think dealing with Iran diplomatically is a very, very challenging task, but it needs to be part of the equation.
And we talk about a new order, new system emerging. How do you envision the government in Tehran? President Trump quite often saying that there is a new regime there, but basically the structure is still there. The language regarding State of Israel remains the same. Destruction of the Jewish state remains official ideology of the Islamic Republic of Iran. When analysts, heads of state, talk about new regime in Tehran, what do they mean by their new regime?
Well, that is an almost ontological question, because I think I see there has been a transformation of the regime away from the supremacy of the clerics to the Revolutionary Guard. We see that the former mayor of Tehran, Mohammad Bakr Ghalibaf, who has been challenged for his approach negotiating with the United States, has been buttressed, has been reconfirmed, has received a lot of endorsement. What's the role of the supreme leader as a veto stakeholder who can decide, who can overrule any decision? We don't know. We don't know what his role is. At the moment, it seems like it's more like a ceremonial role, whereas the decisions are taken by a small group with strong buy-in of the Revolutionary Guard, but not exclusively. So I see a certain degree of transformation towards some sort of a paramilitary regime at the moment, with less importance and less influence of the clerical establishment. And this is always interesting. The Iranian system never relied on, it was not a one-man dictatorship. It relied on let's say a power of cohesion between certain interest groups and certain institutions, and if one of them breaks away, that could have a very dramatic influence on the future of that system. It's we could be sitting here talk for hours about Iranian domestic politics and the Iranian regime. What I find very interesting is that regardless of all these the dramatic impact and dramatic disruption and changes, there is a certain synchronized behavior driven by the ideology, but also driven by some very fundamental principles that are not Islamic. What they are is another matter we can probably discuss
could be
another time.
Quintessentially Persian. I mean, we're coming to the end of our conversation, already 30 minutes basically. It's a context special, that's the reason duration is 30 minutes, not 22 minutes. What is your major takeaway from this particular visit of yours? My last question to you. You're leaving in early June, if I'm not mistaken. From this particular trip, what is the major takeaway that you would like to elucidate?
First take is, of course, that Daniel posted yesterday, I think, calling Azerbaijan beautiful Azerbaijani jazz music, and on his Instagram account, and calling Azerbaijan, Baku, how was it? Baku, the jazz capital of Orient.
Yeah.
The Oriental capital of jazz.
The Oriental capital of jazz. And I think this is such a beautiful, description of how you see Azerbaijan, and you as a Middle East expert, as Orientalist, if I may say so, seeing Azerbaijan like this, enjoying Azerbaijani music, I think it's a great advertisement for Azerbaijani jazz music worldwide. So thank you for this. But if we talk, of course, about the essence of how I observed what Daniel was saying, and you can correct me, I think really the importance, the growing importance of Azerbaijan's role in the region, also in the Middle East, mediation efforts that Azerbaijan can actually provide for international diplomacy, and the threats that are emerging around Azerbaijan, also its relatively small size, gives Azerbaijan opportunity to be one of the initiators of this new security arrangement in the Middle East, because I think it's good timing to start thinking about organizing that these countries in the Middle East should organize themselves in some sort of security organization. I think this was the idea, I think, that Daniel, hopefully, the decision makers in Baku, but also in the entire region will hear, and maybe also Candid Foundation will use its unbelievable network, fascinating network of political connections in the region to work on this.
There are no small and no big partners anymore. It's really, for me, also one of the consequences, one of the lessons of the crisis of the last couple of years. We need every hand on deck. in order to build peace and security in the region. And the better your relationship with your own neighbors are, the better the contribution, the more meaningful the contribution to a regional peace-building process will be.
I mean, Daniel, I'm so grateful to you for this absolutely fantastic conversation. I mean, the world is changing very rapidly. It looks like the old is dying or sort of being in the process of being replaced by a new one. But what is that new one? We don't know. And we tried to find an answer to a number of questions. One of them was, what is Azerbaijan's place in that new emerging world? And to what extent the crisis in Iran will end in a way that we all hope will end peacefully and to the benefit of all the actors.
I think you just quoted Gramsci in a very
Did I?
Casual way.
Oh, perhaps. Yes, indeed.
Thank you for having us.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Yes. Well, it's often said that every profound crisis contains within itself the seeds of not only of danger, but also of opportunity. And whilst the uncertainty surrounding Iran continues to engulf the wider region, it may well be that new openings are quietly emerging, openings that could yet be recognized and acted upon with strategic clarity and sufficient resolve. Perhaps that observation is not entirely without merit. You've been watching Context. I'm Orkhan Amashov, and see you very soon indeed.